Hey guys, this is Robert Jackson, and thank you for tuning in to Station Square and my Discord. Yeah. Anyways, this is Robert, and thank you for tuning into the podcast. I have somebody who's been in the industry for a long time. I know they've been working for, if I'm not mistaken, 20? Yeah, like literally started during the 90s New York like anime boom. And we're going to be talking a lot about that and how the industry had changed and evolved and, a bunch of other stuff that we'll kind of get into. Just some fun stuff like hobbies and whatnot. So today we're going to be talking to Jamie in the corner. Not going to say the last name because I have a terrible habit of mispronouncing last names on the show.
No worries. It's McGonnigal, like in Harry Potter.
McGonnigal. Ah, I like
See?
that. So thank you so much for joining me this or on your end, it's afternoon. It's
It is. It
morning where
is.
I am. But yeah, we could just talk about how this year has been for you, just to do a little bit of an icebreaker before we get on to the main event.
Sure thing. This year it's been long. It's
Right,
been
tell me
great.
about it. Yeah,
Yeah, I know, right? I have a 5-year-old, so he keeps me on my toes. And he is starting kindergarten in a week and a half. So where it's
nice.
a, it's a big day for us coming up. So we went and got his hair cut today, and it looks amazing. It's a little for anyone who's a parent, haircuts of little ones can be traumatic. More so for you than for them because they just age a lot when they get their haircut. So right now he looks 14, and so that's a lot for me to handle. But he got these cool. He got a bit of a fade, and he's got this. It's hard to show on my lack of hair, but he's got this spider web here, shaved into the sides, because he's a big Spidey fan. So I think it looks very
I'm
cool. So it's
actually wearing
a
a
cross between.
no,
Oh
I'm
yeah, I
actually
see, I see.
wearing a Venom shirt and I have like some
Nice.
Spider-Man stuff, but I don't have it. I just mainly have Sonic stuff. I don't have any Spider-Man.
That's all good. He's a Sonic fan too. Just picked him up some Sonic PJs.
Nice.
But yeah, but Spidey, yeah, Spidey is a cross between Spidey and Kai from the new Young Jedi adventures on Disney Plus that he loves. So it's a good
Yeah.
haircut. We're pretty proud. But that's most of what's happening in my life right now. It's pretty domestic, pretty suburban.
Yeah, right on. So, growing up in the East Coast, were there like a lot of opportunities, like when it comes to acting or when it comes to pursuing the creative field, so to speak?
That's a great question. I grew up in Massachusetts, the South Shore, just south of Boston, and I started doing musicals when I was about 10. I was in a community theater production of Evita, and I quickly became obsessed with Eva Peron. I think fifth grade or sixth grade, we had to do a report on some biography on anyone we chose, and all the other little boys were like, Abe Ruth, Abe Lincoln, and I was like Ava Perón, and they were like he's gay, and that was pretty much my start. I did a lot of musicals, as a community theater musicals, and then went to school for theater as well. Moved to New York, and yeah, I mean New York was where it was at as far as musical theater and theater in general. So started out with a bang there, and someone I was doing a new musical with passed my name along to someone at sci-fi.com at the time for a voiceover audition for a voice acting audition for a Flash cartoon, if that takes you back. This is in 1999 or 1998, called Barbarian Moron. That was like a big hit on sci-fi.com. And I did that, and I worked on that show with Lisa Ortiz, who then passed my name along to Mike Sinner Nicholas at NYAV Post. So I did the first couple titles that NYAV ever did. So yeah, it was like you said, it was kind of the boom in New York, certainly, of anime. It was a really cool time to be part of it.
Yeah, because as I'm pretty sure a lot of like anybody who's been involved with, the anime industry or the communities know that and this is something that I'm actually starting to do now because I'm working on a series of video essays talking about like the 90s and how monumental it was for animation, particularly with like when you see stuff like on Fox Kids or Disney and Warner
Hmm.
Brothers, with Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and those, with those programs, but for specifically anime, um, I think around the mid and especially late 90s was when we started seeing like the huge, like, you know, explosion
Hmm.
of so much content that was coming out from like because we used to, by the way, this was back during the days where we used to rent these anime VHSs at your local video
Hmm.
stores. So in case if you want to know, like, I don't want to say old, but if I'm gonna date myself a
Say
little bit, but yeah,
it.
I was there during the days when Blockbuster, with Hollywood Video, when we were just
Oh
starting to
yeah.
see like um, we saw the rise and then we saw the eventual like fall, yeah, fall, and we've seen like the decline of those rental video stores, which is now kind of a thing in the past because we've kind of been now we get most of our streaming services and we've been getting a lot of good stuff out now, but I don't know. There's just something about like, renting your video for like 1, 2 weeks and then there's just something about it that that feels so like it just reminds you of much more like it just reminds you of the simpler times, like
Yeah.
when the media was really starting to have like because we've been getting like a lot of monumental stuff like Pokemon, Dragon Ball, Evangelion, those titles, Sailor Moon, like, and conventions were just starting up. So
Hmm.
it really was like living in like it's particularly the late 90s and early 2000s, it really was like a time to, be an anime fan. Like,
Oh yeah.
especially with all of these shows coming out, Cowboy Bebop, can't believe I almost didn't mention that, but
Hmm.
yeah, so there's just a lot of content and stuff that we've been getting, and that a lot we've still cherished these titles to this very day. And I honestly can't imagine where we'd be right now if it wasn't for um,
Yeah.
those really important, series of franchises that we still love to this very day. I can't imagine.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
something to be said, I think, also for like having physical media in your hand, having a DVD,
Oh,
having a VHS
yeah.
tape in your hand. I remember I think the first anime I ever did was a 1.5 hour feature called Demon Fighter Kocho. That was hentai-ish. It wasn't like too bad, but it was a, I think it was kind of a rip off of Devil Hunter Yoko, I think it was called. But it was terrible, but wonderful. It was my first thing ever. It was NYEV Post, and they were the way studios used to like test out the dubbing companies they would throw them something cheap and see how they did with it, and that was the first one. So there was a lot of like recordings of us in the studio, and that was when they started doing like outtakes on the DVDs and things like that. And from that, I did my first series, which was Magic Users Club, which was so much fun. If you've never seen it, try to find it. And that was all Media Blasters. That was the company then. But when I did that, I remember having the VHS tape and putting it on, and like just watching it was so weird to hear my voice coming out of this character, and watching it on a TV was just like a dream come true. But yeah, that time was so very special. That start of all these studios really. And a lot of them are still around, doing things left and right, but that time was pretty cool. It was fun to be part of some of those foundational titles. I mean, I got to do Jungle Emperor Leo, which was a early Tezuka, not early Tezuka, but a Tezuka film, which was very, very cool to work on. Obviously, like the One Piece, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, a lot of those early, really cool titles that are some of them are still around. So
Yeah, right on. So for your I guess when you started like, dipping your toes into VO, like was it because you were already doing theater? Because I know that most of a lot of actors do have training in theater, radio, or improv. So was it because you were already working as an actor that you um started going pretty much started booking work as a voiceover artist?
Hmm.
Or how did the story go?
Yeah.
Like when you
Yeah,
were
I mean, it's when you're an actor, especially like a new actor in New York, you take anything that'll come your way. I mean, the acting gigs that I did everything from what's called industrials, which are when like a big company. I think there was one thing I did for like American Express, hired a bunch of actors to do something at a trade show. I just know I had to be in a dumb costume for something. I don't remember a lot about it, but it was technically an acting gig. I was getting paid to act. It wasn't a commercial. It was on stage. I remember having to wave a flag behind Smash Mouth on the stage of Radio City Music Hall because it was a gig. Technically, it was cast through a casting agency, so I was getting seen by a casting agency. So you take anything you can get. And then I was, like I said, I was doing this terrible new musical in South Jersey, and someone in that show, Leah Applebaum was her name. She said, you'd be really good at voice acting if you thought about it. And I'm like, not really, because I don't know anyone. And it really, especially then, was a space where you didn't get cast unless you knew someone because it was just so tight knit and small a community. And so she passed my name along to sci-fi.com, like I said, and all the ball kept rolling from there. And so, I ended up on 4Kids. I ended up with NYAV Post, Central Park Media, a lot of different dubbing studios. So yeah, that's kind of where it rolled from then. But it all started with having acting training, going to school for theater, moving to New York to do musicals. And Mike Senator Nicholas would always say that he's like he loved to cast musical theater actors because we have a certain timbre to our voice. We have a certain broad range to our voice that lends itself naturally to animation because you don't have your whole body to act with when you're doing animation. You're acting just with your voice. So because we have a musicality to our voice, it helps a little bit more when you're acting or doing voice acting. And I mean, some of those early titles like Vice Kreutz, I was a casting director on Vice Kreutz or Night Hunters early on, and you going through the cast list, it's basically like all my pals, everyone that I was hanging out with, because I'd be like, hey, want to do a cartoon? And that was pretty much how it started.
yeah. So for the anime industry, how is it like, back in the day and how it definitely evolved as we're in 2023 because you got your start in the 90s. How would you say that the industry evolved since from the 90s up to now?
Oh, I mean, it's night and day, really. I mean, then uh, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously, the media itself has changed a lot. You're looking at digital media versus having a videotape in your hand, and then the industry as a whole, it's bigger. There's I used to hang out a lot with Greg Ayers, another brilliant voice acting legend. And we would often talk at panels at those early conferences in the early 2000s. Him, me, Monica Rial, Chris Patton, a bunch of those folks would be shouting from the rooftops about pirating anime, saying that this is going to change the industry. It's bad. It's not helping, which is what you refer to as the demise of this space. That's what happened, and the companies didn't know yet how to deal with that, how to stop the pirating from going on, and so the companies went under. They started not being as successful, and therefore there were just a lot fewer titles coming to the U.S. From what we know, like there are a lot of titles that were created in Japan, where they knew that if they created this title in Japan, that they could sell it to the U.S. and it would make a lot of money. that stopped happening because you could sell fewer titles to the US because they weren't making any money. So therefore it caused like a problem all the way down to the root. So things weren't getting as created as frequently in Japan even. So that happened. That was one of the big parts of the evolution. But then, Crunchyroll came along, some of these other companies that started streaming services and really were able to stem the tide of that of the pirating challenge. And again, finding ways to produce media in a way that protected their creations and the original creations, and that has kind of helped. I haven't, frankly, been like super tight into the industry in a couple years. I moved to DC about 10 years ago, and have done very little since then. But so I barely even go to conferences anymore or conventions anymore, just because I just haven't really been in the industry in a little while. Once in a while, I'll get a call from someone, hey, come to this, or from you saying, hey, come do a podcast, which I'm grateful to do. But yeah, it's just not as active a space for me personally. But I've seen it change a lot through COVID too. People are now pretty much required to have an in-home studio now if you want to do this work. So like I see
Pretty much
Monica
like me.
Rial.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Monica Rial, like I remain close to a lot of the friends that I made in the space. And it's still fun, hearing them when I turn something on, usually for my kid. I'm like, I know that voice. I know that voice. But like, Stephanie Shea and Mike's and Nicholas are still very close friends. Monica, as I mentioned, yeah, all those folks. I love them, and I am glad they're still part of my life. But yeah.
Yeah. Um, I was also going to mention, like, I was going to talk about your theater work for a little bit.
Sure.
So, from everything that you've been doing from theater, like, what have been some of your most um, fulfilling moments? Or just, it could just be in general, but what would you say were moments that you've done throughout your career that you consider to be like, it could be acting, like, if we're going to talk specifically acting, like, what would you say were
Mhm.
some of the most, like, um, the roles that kind of challenge you personally and ones that you honestly feel really proud of to this day?
Theatrically, or anime wise, or does it matter?
Oh, yeah, it doesn't really matter.
Oh, okay.
Either or,
Um,
yeah.
Theatrically, like I haven't acted on stage in a very long time. I kind of stopped probably last time I was on stage was probably 2008, 2009, around there. Other than, a random random thing here or there. But yeah, I guess in anime, the roles there were some fun roles that challenged me. I mean, I love Pokemon. He's a favorite. It wasn't like a huge challenge necessarily because he like landed right in my sweet spot of where I like to be a voice actor. Um, there was really, I think one of the tougher roles I played was both Omi and Night Hunters, and there was a feature length movie called Weathering Continent that most people haven't heard of or seen. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. I play a Bishonen character named TA, who's a mystic. And everything I'd done up to then was like kind of a wild teenager, off the walls, silly, goofy. And this was just a very grounded, earthy, quiet guy who was very underspoken, soft spoken. So I had to work really hard on that with Mike Sinder Nicholas, who directed it, who was an absolutely brilliant director. I loved working with Michael. So that was probably one of the more challenging roles I played. Um, but then like I thought this question was going towards like a fulfilling moment thing in the industry. And as far as that goes, I spent a lot of time producing Broadway concerts and events for probably about 10 years in New York, where I would do, take a big Broadway musical, put 200 people on stage, have 2,000 people in the audience, usually as a one night event, like a concert version of a musical, usually benefiting some charity that I cared about. And I did a lot of them. I did over 100 of them in New York. But the one that always stands out to me as my favorite, there's a musical called The Secret Garden, which is based on the Frances Hodgson Burnett book, written by Lucy Simon and Martha Norman. Lucy passed this past year. She's a dear friend, wonderful, wonderful human being. I think Secret Garden like is what Broadway could have become in the 90s, and then someone dropped the ball. It's just a really beautiful show, and that was my favorite thing that I ever did theatrically. But I laughed because you'd said, we were talking about like the other roles that I played. And this past year, past Christmas, funny story, I'd taken my son and my husband to see the National Symphony Orchestra do their Christmas concert at the Kennedy Center here in DC. My friend Laura Benanti, who's a Broadway star, Tony winner, TV star as well, and movie star. She's in No Hard Feelings with Jennifer Lawrence, that just came out last summer. So anyway, we went to see her singing in this concert. Her and her mom were headlining all the holiday songs, and so afterwards, or during the show, at one point, Laura says Santa Claus is coming, so be ready. And then Santa Claus never showed up, and it was a little weird. And so we go backstage. We're like, "What happened to Santa Claus?" And she's like, "We've been calling him and calling him. He never showed up. We don't know what happened. He's been doing this for years, but he's never like just disappeared." So my husband jokingly said, "Well, Jamie's got a Santa suit back at home if you need him to fill in," because I had bought it years ago for a thing on Capitol Hill where people were taking Santa Claus around to meet senators and congresspeople to get them to vote for climate change legislation. Told like Santa Claus, North Pole melting, blah blah blah. So I had this suit, and then I'd used it during COVID because friends were like, "Hey, I can't bring my kid to see Santa at the mall because we're stuck at home." And I was like, "Why don't I do some Zoom Santa Claus meetings?" So I did a whole bunch of those, and that was really fun. So I'm leaving the Kennedy Center after the concert. We had a great time. Laura calls me and says, "Hey, were you serious about the Santa Claus thing?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Can you be back here at 7 o'clock with the Santa outfit?" I'm like, "Sure." So that was my story of how I became Santa Claus at the Kennedy Center for the National Symphony Orchestra, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. Um, and I know that, oh yeah, see there.
And
Just um yeah, I know it's kind of been like a thing where it's like the weather can kind of be like cold and then it gets hot, and now I think we're kind of like at the
yeah.
point where it's like, oh man, everybody's catching a little like
Oh
this
yeah,
season.
yeah.
So yeah. I wanted to ask you, how is it like being in DC, since you moved from New York to the DC area?
I've been here 12 years around there, 10, 11,
Oh,
12, something like
nice.
that. It's DC. I don't love DC proper. I like the things, that it's the seat of government and that there's some cool historical parts of it. I like the town I live in. I live in Hyattsville, Maryland, right outside DC. And it's a very progressive little city. We were one of the first cities in the country to allow for non-citizen voting, one of the first cities in the country to allow for 16-year-olds and up to vote in municipal elections. It's a very diverse city, so I like raising my kid here. So yeah, I like that part of it. I love the tourism part. I love being able to go to the Smithsonian whenever I want to. There's some really beautiful parts of the city. But yeah, I mean, I'm raising my family here. It's where I am now.
Yeah, and I was looking at your concerts and events. So being a
Mm,
producer and director of over 200 events over the years, and being the producer for the, New York Music Theater Festival. So how do you, and this is a question that I kind of ask for people who have been like, who have done directing and they've been acting for a while and they've moved and then they got into the director's chair. Do you like being on the other side of the glass, or what do you prefer? Do you like to just, be expressive, or actually directing other actors with depending on what project that you're actually doing at the time? Because wow,
That's
I
a
can't even mention like all the stuff that you've done because I'd probably be here for like another 10 or so minutes.
yeah, it's
Like
my
it's big. List.
I've been all
Yeah.
over the place. My resume
Yeah, pretty
is
much. Yep.
kind of all over the place. So yeah, as far as like what I like more, I love performing. I love directing. I love producing. I
Yeah,
think it
pretty much a
depends on
jack
the
of all
project.
trades. Yeah.
I mean, I loved in New York when you're um, in New York, it's hard to break into anything. So if you want to be a producer, you need access to lots of cash. If you want to be a director, you need to find the right people and get referred around. As an actor, you have to audition your face off all the time. So I found myself with these concerts, an opportunity for me to like pave my own way. And do my own thing and create the work for myself. So um, I would have an idea and I would say, all right, how do I make this happen? I was doing a reading of a new musical at the York Theater off Broadway. And the artistic director had a conversation with me at one point during the one of the breaks. And he said, hey, we were supposed to give an award to Cheetah Rivera for our big benefit event in a couple weeks, but she turned it down. She can't be there or whatever it was. Do you have any ideas for like what we could do for a concert? I said, why don't you do a concert of all new musicals and new songwriters with Broadway stars singing their songs? He's like, that's a great idea. Do you want to put it together? And I had never done anything like this in my life. I knew a lot of the writers because I worked a lot with the BMI Musical Theater Workshop. So I knew those writers who were constantly writing new musicals. So I started going to the writers and saying, hey, do you have a Broadway star who can sing this song for you and be in this concert? It's going to be put out on CD. And sure enough, we put together a concert. And from then on, it just became me coming up with an idea saying, hey, why don't I do a concert of Pippin? I love Pippin. It's a great musical. And let's do it in New York with all stars. And so we did Pippin with like Rosie O'Donnell was in it, and Ben Vereen was in it. Billy Porter was in it before a lot of people knew who Billy Porter was. All these, it was just an all-star concert in New York. And I loved doing it. And then you could do small concerts, big concerts, anything in between. I started working a lot at a place called Joe's Pub. So we would do like a concert of all songs from flop musicals that a lot of people hadn't heard with big stars singing them, or like taking actually there's a writing team named Pasek and Paul, Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, who at the time were in college. And I found a CD of theirs and I reached out to them and I said, I want to do a concert of your music at Joe's Pub. They hadn't even graduated college yet. Now they're more well known for having written La La Land and won an Oscar and Greatest Showman and I mean Dear Evan Hansen. Like they've written most of the musicals you've heard of in the past 10 years. But back then, no one knew them yet. But I had this opportunity to, raise them up because I thought they were super talented. But yeah, I loved that. I loved being able to give voices to people who give voices to folks or raise them up in a way when a lot of people maybe hadn't heard of them yet and kind of launch I'm not at all saying I launched Pascal and Paul's career because that's insane. But I was there at the start and was able to help them out in some way.
Nice. And we could talk about your work as a writer if you like.
Nah. I used to do writing for BroadwayWorlds.com, doing interviews and things like that of people who were coming through or working on shows that were coming through DC. But that was about it. I don't consider myself a writer really. Just
It's all
someone who was
good.
a fan. I like being a
No
fan.
worries. Yeah, it's all totally fine with me. Let's see. What's something else that you want to share? Like anything upcoming work or projects that you might be working on right now that you want to, I guess, plug before
I mean, I work in
it's
politics now, so I mean, I'm looking for my next gig right now in politics. I work primarily in yeah, and political organizing and progressive organizing. So making sure the right people get elected and that the right kind of laws pass. So that's really my focus mostly. My that and my family. Like I'm really all tuned into being my kid's papa. It's my favorite thing I am.
Yeah. So with your family, how would you say that they really helped, you know, you grow as a person and just,
Hmm.
you know, being such an integral part of your life?
That's a really good question. Thanks for asking it.
No problem.
My I didn't know um I didn't know I could be something that I liked so much until I was a parent. Um, I like we've talked about. I have a million different jobs that I've had in my life. I've traversed every part of the spectrum as far as what kind of jobs you can have. And while yes, parenting is technically a job, it's also like having landed where I have, luckily with the kid that I have and the husband that I have. I'm grateful. It's helped me grow as a person, learn a lot about who I am as I relate to other people. Um, as an actor, you get used to a lot of frustration, a lot of um, rejection, and you can take it personally. It's really hard not to take personally because you're getting rejected a lot. That's just part of what it is, and it becomes hard to love yourself. It's a big challenge, and actors need a lot of therapy to come out of that space where they're constantly beating up on themselves. Um, when I have my kid turn to me and say, "I love you, Papa," it all goes away. Everything else, all the other bullshit, all the things that have been a challenge that week, that month, that year, it goes away. And because I matter so much to that little kid, nothing else matters to me. If that makes sense, it's hard. It's hard to explain when you're. It's hard to explain how to be a parent. I can't tell anyone how to be a parent because every kid is different and every parent is different and how everyone parents is different. But the way my heart is attached to this kid, there's just nothing like it in the world.
Yeah. A beautiful answer. Thank you so much for sharing.
Of course.
Yep. I don't think I have any more questions at the moment. So if you like to, I guess close us out with any last bit of like advice or just anything that you want to give to aspiring actors, that now would be a good time to do so. And if you're on any like
Sure.
social media website, you could just share where people can, follow and support you. That would be very much appreciated.
Sure. I'm on Instagram, just it's J McGonnigal, initial J, last name McGonnigal. That's where I'm most active there in Facebook because I'm old. I think I'm on TikTok, but I don't really think so. I don't think I've ever created anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm old as far as social media goes, but and then advice, thoughts, just if you love it, if it's something you want to do with your life, don't let anyone tell you that you can't. You don't need permission to lead. That was some piece of advice that was told to me by someone very special and important to me a long time ago. If you want to make something happen, go make it happen. No one, as long as you know it's not a terrible or a bad thing. But yeah, you don't need permission. You have the power to do what you want to do. There's sometimes challenges along the way, but there's always a way to surpass or not even surpass, go through, go under, go around that challenge, and you'll be fine. But at the end of the day, um, the only thing that matters is that you love yourself, and that's pretty key.
Yep. And I guess on that note, we'll just cap it off with that. So thank you so
All
much,
right.
Jamie, for joining me. And if anybody wants to get in contact, like there's this website and everything. And yeah, look forward to seeing what you got in store for the near future.
All right. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and we'll see how the rest of this year goes. And if you guys want to check out more episodes, there will be more coming along the way this week. Definitely stay tuned on YouTube or Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever these are going to be posted. I'll just provide links when I, if I can. But until then, thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. This is Robert Jackson signing out, and until next time, this has been the Station Square Podcast. Adios. Bye.